We are ready, Madam Chair.
Calling this March 2nd, 2022 Port and Commerce Advisory Board regular meeting to order. Can we all stand for the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam Clerk, if you would please take the roll call.
Today's roll call: Paquette,
Present.
Walkers,
Here.
Hughes,
Here.
Lawrence,
Here.
Smith,
Here.
Jaffa,
Here.
Chair Homdahl.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. Next, we are going to have citizen comments on any subject except those items scheduled for public hearing. Anyone signed in will get the first opportunity to speak. Speaking time is limited to 3 minutes. Madam Clerk, is anyone signed in to speak?
I do not have anyone signed in.
Okay, is there anyone from the floor that wishes to speak? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to the approval of the agenda and the consent agenda. I need a motion and a second.
I'll motion, Madam Chair. Second.
Okay. There is a typo on the agenda. The date for the approval for the minutes is listed as January 5th, but we approved those minutes previously. So the minutes that we are approving today that are in our packet are from the February 2nd PAC meeting. So that's changed from January 5th to February 2nd. Are there any other changes to the agenda?
Is this when we want to make the note that we have one more?
Yes, please. Yes, we have another presenter or another person present for the discussion about housing and employment difficulties. That's Dr. Henry Burns from the Seward High School.
So we'll add Henry Burns with Jenna Peterson during the presentation section of the agenda.
Do we need to make a note that this was noticed previously and postponed?
Thank you for saying that.
Thank you. Any other changes? Okay, Madam Clerk, can we vote on the agenda, please?
Voting on today's agenda and consent agenda: Jaffa,
Yes.
Paquette,
Yes.
Hughes,
Yes.
Walkers,
Yes.
Lawrence,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Chair Homdahl.
Yes.
Your agenda and consent agenda are approved, and approved on today's consent agenda are the February 2nd, 2022 PACAB meeting minutes.
Next is special orders, presentations, and reports. There are no proclamations or awards. Does administration have a report?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I included a little bit more of an expansive report than we have in prior PACAB packets. Try and do a little bit of a recap. I gave you guys just a summary. I know housing has been a topic of urgent discussion, not just in council meetings, but also for this body as well. So I gave you just an update on some of the projects that we have underway to address the housing issue. Just want to reiterate the utility master plan was approved by council at the meeting this Monday. And we feel like we've got a number of things on the docket in the coming year just to tackle the housing issue. We acknowledge that it's complex and it's multifaceted and it's not going to be solved quickly, but I just wanted to provide you guys just kind of a high-level overview, and I'll take any questions you might have.
Thank you. Any questions at this time?
Yeah, I appreciate the report, the Assistant Manager Saul, and I think that's really helps this board do its work. Two things. One, we are, and even today we have some presentation from community businesses and establishments to help us determine the extent of housing problem and potential solution. In the end, it would, I think, be beneficial for us to best understand how to frame a response to you when we try to consolidate this information. Because I think at the end of the presenters, that's essentially what we'll need to do. So hopefully the administration can come back and tell us how to frame that response that would best give you the tools you need. The second, and this in my mind is the housing issue as well. The city owns a right piece of residential property that's currently the Public Works facility. Hopefully, long-term, that would be rehabilitated and put on a market as residential property. But what is the vision, if there is one, of the new facility? I really haven't seen that. You know, we're working on acquiring property, but probably haven't gone to an architectural design or anything, but is there a vision what that Public Works facility will look like?
Yeah, really good question, and it's timely because we just had a project meeting this morning to talk about that specific issue. Last year, I'm going to say early fall, Councilmember McClure, Councilmember DeMoss, the Public Works Director, the City Manager, and myself went over and we visited communities on the other side of the peninsula that have, Soldotna and Kenai especially, have pretty relatively new public works facilities, and we feel like the Kenai facility probably closely represents what we're going to need. They had multiple buildings where ours will likely be one single facility. We're going to need to modify what Kenai has to add an administrative area and then additional like equipment and tool storage for the water and sewer guys especially. And then we'll have a second building for the sand shed. But we feel like we have a pretty good idea, and the Public Works Director's got the plans and the RFP documents from Kenai that we're probably going to use as something of a template, at least a starting point. And I can provide that information to you if you'd be interested.
I think when it's available, consolidated, you know, I wouldn't say just a conceptual idea at this point, probably premature, but there is an idea being developed.
Yeah.
And that's sufficient for me.
And I would add that the Community Development Director is also working on just a preliminary level, looking at the current location and starting to come up with some options for what type of residential development would be beneficial in that space. That project's attractive for a lot of reasons. It's been on the CIP list for a number of years, obviously, and it's a project that we want to take place, but as you pointed out, it's going to turn into housing, and that's probably a much better use for that space than more industrial facility.
Thank you. That's all I had.
The Hemlock Subdivision, that's where the campground is right now?
Correct.
Okay. So is the city confident that they're going to move forward with this plan? I'm a little shaky on that because there's been a lot of public pushback.
So council has, in some way, shape, or form, taken action on 3 different task orders to move that project forward.
Right.
We're working on the replat and the rezone at this point in time. And just for public clarity, so right now we're working on the replat to separate, because that parcel right now also includes the space that is the bike park. The bike park is being left alone, and the subdivision is going to be between the bike park and Hemlock, that space.
So this is pretty much a done deal? I mean, it's not done, I understand that, but you're moving forward with it?
Right. It will come back to council for the plating action.
Okay.
And so it's not a done deal, but we are continuing to move forward with it.
Okay. Because I mean, the public feedback I've gotten is that people are very upset about having something taken away. And so I guess I'm wondering, I know that we saw a map that had Kenai Borough land on it. Are there, and I haven't seen that Kenai Borough land within the city limits. I haven't seen a map that might show where the state might have land within the city limits. But I'm wondering, are there any discussions going on at either of those agencies or government levels about having those people open up the land for development?
I would say no meaningful conversations have taken place on that front as of yet.
Okay. Is that a possibility?
It's definitely something we can think about. I think as far as the city goes, the municipal land plan will be coming back to P&Z in the near future to revisit how to best utilize city property, but I'm not aware of any meaningful conversations that have taken place recently to the borough or to the state about how they're using their parcel.
So I think that's a valuable step to take, right? Because the city can't be responsible entirely for solving this problem. And you're not getting into being a landlord. But if there's land inside the city limits or even outside, everybody doesn't have to live inside the city, right? I mean, we know that many people don't already. If there are other developable lands, it seems like pursuing, getting the other people that own those lands to realize that there's a real need, and it's time to start looking at, you know, either develop it, sell it, do something with it instead of just letting it sit there.
That's a good point.
Madam Chair, in a previous conversation, you asked me not to be tough on you. This is me not being tough on you. On the parcel that would be the Hemlock Subdivision, it looks like it's approximately maybe 6 acres in size. And the lots are 6,000 square foot. That seems like a little bit of a shoehorn effect there. That's not very big as far as lots. I don't expect them to be huge residential lots, but I would think more in the line of 10,000 square feet would be a more suitable size parcel for a single-family residential subdivision. The existing shop area, what size is that? Do you have any idea, the acreage?
2 acres-ish. I'd have to get back to you with the exact.
I was just curious.
I will get back to you on that.
Yeah,
With regard to the lot size for Hemlock, there's a lot of different opinions about that. I mean, there's definitely smaller lots. If you look in downtown Seward, we have a lot smaller lots than 6,000 square feet. So I guess it just becomes a question of 10,000, but then you're obviously going to lose homes. I mean, right now the plan is for 40 single-family homes. You know, I've had some folks share that opinion. I've also had some folks say, well, I've got a 6,000 square foot lot and I can park my boat and my RV just fine. It also comes down to the shape, of course, and at the end of the day, 40 homes makes a big difference in this community, so.
Yeah, no doubt upon that result, that would make a difference. I think it's important that we find a way to provide housing, but I also think it needs to be somewhat, it's a beautiful place. It needs to be a little aesthetic and not see a bunch of shoehorned houses in there, you know, but that's just my opinion.
Understood.
Any other questions?
Have we got a number of how many people we need to be able to home? Do we have that number?
Didn't Nicole answer that when she was here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
70 a year,
Yeah, 70, 75.
75 a year.
75 more homes.
A year.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm talking people, not homes, but,
Well, that's a really interesting question. I think it comes down to what kind of community does Seward want to be? You know, how much growth do we want to have? This is just my personal opinion, but I think Seward, this is a blessing that there will always be more of a demand for housing than we will actually have, right?
right.
And that's going to always be the case, but I think in terms of how much growth we want to have, I think that's just something that the community's going to need to decide for itself.
Yeah, well, at the moment, what we're really not talking about is growth. What we're really talking about right now is being able to accommodate the people who need to be here, right? We'll never be able to have enough housing for everyone who wants to live in Seward, and I don't think that should be the objective ever, right? That would totally change it. But there's a number, right? Providence hires X number of people. The Sea Life Center hires X number of people. There is an actual number of how many people we need to be able to home in this region. And it's not necessarily just inside the city limits, but in this valley, if you want to call it that, how many people do we need homes for? Because we're obviously lacking, but I just want to make sure as we're moving forward that we have a better idea, because we're going to create a situation where we're already in it. There's never enough homes, never going to, for everybody that wants to be here. So I just want to make sure we've got some, check mark somewhere along the line so we don't keep building and building and building long beyond whatever that actual number is.
I don't think we have that data at this point in time. Not saying we couldn't work on that, but that would be an interesting project to undertake.
Right. That's why I had suggested a consultant at some point, because I don't think we have the resources.
Councilmember Jeff.
Assistant Manager, this topic will be discussed at City Council meeting, again, the Hemlock Subdivision.
Correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions for administration? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to other reports and announcements. We'll start with the Alaska Railroad report.
So I sent these to administration already. I'll pass around, because I'm going to reference it just at the end of my report. If you could pass that around, please. So you have my monthly report in your packet. You probably have heard all the trains in the yards. We've had a lot of train traffic, and we're going to have another set of train traffic around March 12th-ish. So you'll see freight trains through the end of March, which is pretty exciting. Coastal Classic is still on schedule to start May 7th, and they have very strong sales. And this year, I do have an update to the number. We're expecting 81 cruise ships for a total of 95 cruise ship days. And one thing I didn't really flesh out in this is we're already getting strong numbers for spring project barges. So we have a really busy schedule this spring, a lot of freight coming to Seward, so that's nice to see that a lot of projects are happening. So what I handed out to you has to do with my last bullet point. On February 10th, the railroad did release a Seward passenger dock replacement progressive design build. We had a site visit on the 25th, which was Friday. And you'll see in what I passed out to you, there's a little bit of a timeline on that project. And part of that is I've been telling the normal community events that use our cruise ship terminal in the fall and winter to not plan anything, because we could be moving forward with dock plans, demoing that building as soon as this year. And we're already working on our plans for our temporary terminal until the dock and the terminal can be, the terminal would be rebuilt and the dock would finish construction. So things are moving forward very quickly. We have a project meeting planned with the city to talk about utilities, moving forward with our engineering permits, and that the proposals from the February 10th will close on March 10th. So we'll start to know by April we're going to have a contractor in place for that work that needs to get done. So we're pretty excited and moving forward. And then someone did ask me about our freight dock project. We're still in permitting for our freight dock project. Everything we're doing is keeping in mind that we might have multiple construction jobs happening at the same time. So we could have 3 construction firms out there: dock terminal, cruise ship dock terminal, and freight dock. So at this point, we're not letting any moss grow on our rolling rock. So I don't know if the board has any questions for me today.
Any questions?
Of course. Okay, the 60 million that the bonding that you're looking at, is that enough for the entire project, or is there just?
It would be enough for the dock project. We will be looking for different funding for our cruise ship terminal. And again, just to clarify for the public, we have to, as the railroad, we have to get permission to go to bonding from the state. So it's not state bonds, it's not any impact to, state citizens. We have to back up that bonding with full force of the Alaska Railroad revenue and whatever money we have.
Well, would you also be looking for the state for any capital money?
We're not requesting any. You'll see in some of these documents, the state did give us $4 million a few years ago. I don't know if it has which year in here, but that was to start this project and start working on, because we've known in 2019. We've known that our dock was at the end of its useful life, so they did already put some funds towards this project.
One other question. Have you or your contractor or potential contractors evaluated any problem with housing for the workforce that would be required for this job?
So most of the firms that were, well, the firms that were at the site visit and that I know are involved are pretty familiar with Seward. We haven't had that level of discussion with them, like where are you gonna house your construction crews, but all these firms have been in some sort of capacity in Seward for different jobs, so I'm sure, they're aware of kind of the situation.
So possibly a temporary camp? Okay.
Can't comment on.
Any other questions?
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Christie. Next is the Chamber of Commerce report.
Hello. I'm excited to report that ad sales for our Seward Hometown Guide have started. So if you or anyone you know who operates a local service or utility in the community wants to get advertising in that, we'll be selling them for the next 2 weeks. And then we'll be working really hard on creating a relocation and local services guide for our community and those looking to relocate to our community. The big plus is that it's going to be ready for May 1st for our seasonal influx of employees. So really excited to get that ball rolling and finish the trifecta of publications that the Seward Chamber of Commerce has to offer. We have also started registration for the 94th Mount Marathon race. So if you hope to run this year, get your name in that lottery now. If you have priority registration, feel free to go ahead and re-register and start training. If you run into any glitches, let us know, but I think we caught them all. We also have started accepting vendor applications for the 4th of July and are at capacity already based off of how many vendors we've usually had in the past. So we've started re-looking at our setup and seeing if we can accommodate more vendors, but we're just getting so much interest and excitement for being here for the 4th of July. So that's exciting for us. We've also been working closely with Kellyanne at Alaska SBDC, who has been an amazing resource for the community, has met with about 20 clients in Seward in the 2 months that she's been on hand. And I'll start including a monthly report from her as well now that she's up and rolling. And she'll be a presenter at our first Chamber of Commerce luncheon in a while that we'll be having at the end of March. So keep your eyes out for that. Also, keep your eyes out for the Community Awards voting. Nominations are open until the end of the week, so if you look around the room and see anybody that you think we should recognize, feel free to send in a nomination form. The categories are Community Service Award, I'm going to stare off into the distance while I try to remember, Community Service Award, Business Site Development Award, and Business Person of the Year Award. A final note is that I've included a slide of some tourism data in the packet. This is kind of a goal of mine to include a report each month to you about how we're doing tourism-wise. This report is a year-over-year, and moving forward I'll do a more in-depth monthly analysis. And as I work on that and do that, if there's anything that you see that you want to know more about, anything we should focus on and share with you in a different light, this data is really manipulative in a good way, where I can kind of see pretty much down to how many people walk into the Chamber of Commerce on Tuesday, July 15th in 2019. So just let me know what you want to see and I'll try to accommodate as best as I can. I'm also planning to make that information public to our members, so everybody should be able to kind of see what's going on and turn anecdotes into data. That's all I have. Any questions, comments, concerns? Sweet.
Thanks.
No problem. Thank you.
If no questions, we will move on to the Harbor Master's report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So you have my report in there. I just want to touch up on a couple of things. So I wasn't here at the last work session you guys had. I was in Juneau, actually with the mayor. She was actually, as a railroad, pushing a facility grant program and we actually talked to the DOT Commissioner about the federal funds coming in. So hopefully Might be a pass-through, might come right to municipalities, nobody really knows, but they're working on it. The Harrison and Gravel's barge arrived yesterday. They offloaded all their equipment at the northeast launch ramp. Now the barge is over there by GK and Float. They're gonna start pulling piling here next day or so, and then start revamping the barge to pull metal piling and then pull the ones at the launch ramp, then move over and get ready to start driving piling on the new GK and Float. So that project is moving along. Yeah, and actually the last of our floats will be arriving on Sunday on the barge coming in. So everything will be here. And we actually did find, for the launch ramp floats, we actually did find creosote company to soak them with, because we couldn't find anybody because that one shut down, but they found one in Oregon. It's actually do railroad ties, so they're going to do our beams at the glue lamps that are actually in the water on the launch ramp. But so that's a good thing. We don't have to be the first ones to use some different type of material. We don't know how long it's going to last. That's what I got. Take any questions.
Do you have a idea on when the launch ramp will be finished?
So it all depends on when, so everything will be ready for the floats. The uplands will be done and paved. It's supposed to be done by mid-May, end of May. It might go into June depending on the, getting the ramps up here, get them up here. So.
That's different floats than for the
Different
KL.
floats, yeah. GK&L floats are here. What slowed us down with the launch ramp was the permitting. We couldn't go out to bid until the permitting was completed, and they were 3 months back. So that's what slowed us down there. If we were on time there, then we would probably have those floats here also.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to presentations. Our first presentation is a discussion with Jenna Peterson.
Hi there. Thank you for having me. So I don't have a clear presentation necessarily, but I wanted to bring some of my thoughts and opinions to the housing situation in Seward. I do want to thank you all for taking a closer look at the housing situation. I think that it's something that we are going to benefit from overall. Having everybody bring this to the table and kind of open discussion. I'm excited about it. But I do want to point out that this is something that isn't new. This is something that has been a problem in Seward for a very, very long time. It kind of has an ebb and a flow, and I feel like every few years it really comes to a head. And this is where we're at right now. Things kind of is always at a low summer. We're always looking for housing in Seward. And I don't, at this point, see any major changes happening right this very minute, but I do think that we are on the cusp of some big changes that are coming down the line. I don't think it's something that we're going to be able to fix with one overnight decision, for sure. I think everybody will agree with that. Some of the things that I have seen that, actually I just wanted to point out too, I do, obviously, I work at Seward Real Estate Company. My husband was a general contractor here in town for about 15 years. We ran CAP Construction, and now we own and operate Metco, Alaska. So I've had some experience in the facets of the building side of things as far as housing goes and development in the Seward area. There are, I think that some of the big hinges that we have, obviously, cost and demand is a huge thing. I think that's driving housing and the difficulty, the level of difficulty it is for people to find homes in Seward. Right now, there are 3 homes for sale in Seward, if that. And we just had a home that listed here downtown just this last week that sold in 5 days and had 7 offers on it. It was very competitive, and it's a very difficult market, as many people know, to get into a home in Seward. I think that one of the big things is to have the supply increase of homes. I know I heard you talking about it just recently, and I know that in previous presentations as well, it's been brought up that we need more homes. And we have a very limited amount of space here in Seward in order to work with, in order to have those homes. There are a lot of people out there that are really excited about building, but unfortunately, the cost to build is extremely high right now. I think that I don't think that it is necessarily the city's responsibility to fix the problem either. I think that the city could definitely make some changes or work to streamline some of the processes in order to make building a little bit easier for folks coming to town that do want to build their own homes instead of buy. But realistically, typically people are building approximately a 2,000 square foot home. It costs you about $225 per square foot to build that home. So you're looking at $450,000 approximately for just the home, not the land that it goes on. And a construction loan is 25% down. So, how many people do we know that have $100,000 sitting in a bank account ready to throw at building a home? And that's one of the really big things that we see that is a big challenge for people, because there are a lot of people out there that are truly motivated and do want to get their own home built instead of buying, which would put a little bit less pressure on the buyer's market. Let me see. Those were the big things. I think I would love to see the city, as far as some things that I think that the city could help with. I think that it would be nice to see working with the installation of utilities to make that a more feasible thing. There's been recently quite a few properties that have been sold in the Seward area, inside city limits anyways, that don't have utilities to them, and people are looking at a fantastic price on a piece of property, but realizing that you're going to spend that amount again just to have those utilities installed, and that can make that almost an unattainable goal for someone who wants to just get their house in the ground. It puts it out there. Land availability, I think, is another really big problem, and I can hear that everybody's talking about it. I know that there's a couple really big projects that are coming down the pipe that I think is going to make some more land available. I hope that the building process, and again, I hope the city looks really hard at the utilities costs and trying to figure out a way to work around that, whether it's installing that and passing that on to the property values, something along those lines. Let me just make sure I covered everything, but for the most part, I wanted to open it up to questions that you might have for me.
Jenna, one thing that you didn't mention is that I believe you have a small apartment property that you manage?
I have a lot of hands going in a lot of different directions, and sometimes
Can you talk a little bit, because I know that the city made some changes to code to accommodate a smaller sized dwelling, and could you just talk about your occupancy and how that is working?
So we have two 12-unit complexes in town. We have the one that's over by Avtech on 3rd Avenue, and then we also have one that's up on Benson, right next to where the Jesse Lee home used to stand. Those are at full capacity right now. We, within a month, had everything, month of completion, we had all of those units completely filled. Those are 1 to 2 person capacity units. They're studio apartments, all studio apartments that are 250 square feet with a full kitchen and a full bathroom on the 3rd Avenue location. Up on Benson, 8 of our units are the same studio apartments that are identical, as well as 4 of them being 1-bedroom units. I do find that I have folks standing in line for days for the 1-bedroom units, but again, the studio apartments also are at full capacity at all times, for sure. In our 3rd Avenue location, I do have rented out to companies in town, 5 and 5, so 10 of those units are actually rented out to larger corporations that use those as housing for their employees. But all of my units are long-term as far as that goes. They're not seasonal housing.
Do you have a sense of how many more units just like those we could build and fill?
Well, I think that we could probably build and fill 8 more. Realistically, I do think that we need more. Now I feel like we're satiated as far as the amount, or saturated as far as the number of smaller units that we have. We need 2 and 3 bedroom units. We do need rentals. I could say that for days. We need places for people to live, that they could come here and try out Seward, make sure this is where they want to live, or maybe they're just not prepared to buy because they need to build a credit and they have other monetary issues that they need to deal with, but we definitely need more rentals in this town as well. And the 2 and 3 bedroom units are what we need at this point. I know I could fill studio apartments again, but really, we need them for families and for larger spaces, at least a minimum of 2 bedroom spaces.
Right.
Would you be willing to comment on the Forest Acres subdivision and just a quick math that you just said about the cost to build? That looks like these are about $500,000 starting lots.
Realistically, if you're gonna build a single-family home, you're probably looking at close to that sort of a value.
So this is a $20 million subdivision then, right?
I haven't seen the map, to be honest with you.
Okay.
I don't know how many homes, how many properties it's gonna make available.
Just so Carl's, I remember his comment here was it looks tight, and it does look tight. So these are, and just using this as an example, not picking on it for, any development's gonna be similar. And that's big money to get started in a house.
Yeah.
And, is there some other way that we would look at a subdivision like this, to maybe make it more accessible?
Well, I hesitate to make too much of a decision on it without knowing a little bit more, and I apologize for not having done that sort of homework. Building isn't cheap, let's say that. But I do think that we have plenty of people in this town that if we make it a feasible and an attainable number, and as far as the cost to build, I think that we'll find the people to fill those spaces. And realistically, our property, the lot sizes here downtown are a half of that size. So if we're doing just fine with those lot sizes. So I think a significant number of the homes that you see here in town are actually on 2 city lots at minimum. And so those are going to be similar to the city lots in town anyways.
It's a little concerning how we're just, stuff like this is going to exclude a large segment of the population that we need to house here. And we've seen what happened in California where people are having to commute 30, 40, 50 miles to work in the city. And I fear that this kind of, these sorts of things, not, the Forest Acres one in particular, I have nothing, I think they're all going to look like that, right? That's what you're seeing up on the hill there in Doorway. And so I feel like we need to keep that in mind, because where is everybody else going to live?
Yeah, I think that.
I'll stop at that, thank you.
Yeah, I think that it would be helpful and make it a much more attainable thing if we could get ahead of it, and instead of expecting people that are purchasing those properties to buy and build themselves, if we could find some way to get 10 homes built and then turn around and sell them, it's a much more reasonable thing to expect people to get a regular conventional loan versus a regular financing in general, than to expect them to have the funds that are available in order to do a construction loan.
Yeah, thank you.
So, yeah.
So, my question, have you had any, Doorway.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was developed, there were 15 homes built by a spec builder, his name was Call Construction, and they sold within a year. Has any spec builders approached your realty company about anything like that here in the Seward area, or is it, right now, it's sort of in limbo?
That's hard for me to answer, in order to keep people's information
Non-disclosure?
private, yeah.
Okay.
But I think it's been something that I think a lot of people are talking about right now,
Well,
so.
that's the way this could be feasible, is a spec builder coming in and building.
I think that could be something that would be very helpful.
But
They
just
have to
wondered,
have deep
if you
pockets.
could answer it.
Yeah, hi. What government subsidies are operating in our area that would help first buyers, single families, to maybe afford these high costs? Are there any going on right now?
I'd have to get back to you to really look at it. There are a lot of different financing opportunities out there right now, and especially with, there's, for lack of a better term, a lot of COVID money out there running around and people getting extra assistance. So not specifically that I know of, but I know that there are a lot of different funding types out there that are for people, like first-time home buyers and whatnot. that are definitely available there. You just need to talk to different lenders in order to find those. We've got lots of contacts for people like that.
To the original Doraway subdivision and the original houses that went up there, a lot of people got into that, first-time homeowners, because it was heavily subsidized. So that made it doable for middle-class people in town.
I don't think I don't think that there's gonna be a problem finding the people to fill those slots, especially in the Hemlock Subdivision and other areas. There's a line of people out the door ready to buy, and there's a significant number of people as well that are working on the project of building. We come back around again to availability, though. There is no land, no single-family land, smaller bits of land that are available in the city of Seward or the Seward area right now. There are plenty of people that I think probably would take advantage of building. I say plenty of people. There's a few people out there that I think definitely would take advantage of building some single-family homes and things like that and getting on that project, but there's not anywhere to do it at.
I appreciate your participating today, and I think you're well positioned to offer a view across a spectrum of both from the realty and the building. And I have a group of questions I could ask them individually, but what would you see as the biggest problems for a builder coming into town? Those things could include property, like you said, a place to house their workers, the availability of workers, city regulations or ordinances, funding. Those are kind of the things, and of course the cost of material. What are those things would you see as the biggest impediment to a contractor building new houses in Seward?
Well, I would actually turn it right back around, and if you can find a builder to do it, that would be a really good start. We have a handful of amazing builders in town, but they're all very overwhelmed and at least 6 months to a year out in order to build in the Seward area. So even if you had the housing and you had the financing available, you're still going to be challenged to find yourself your contractor in the first place. But housing is definitely a big part of it as well. Yeah.
So attracting a contractor with an out-of-city workforce would be important.
That would be a bonus for sure.
So could you speak to, and maybe this is a regular every year event, but because of this, I've sort of focused on, there's two motels, at least two, that are shuttered right now. This one down the street, Murphy's. People are looking for housing and these places are closed. That somehow doesn't square with me. So where's the economics there that can justify someone closing a needed facility in the winter when there's people begging for housing?
Well, I think there's a cost of doing business, and there's employees that come along with that, and you gotta have the housing in order to have the employees as well. So I think that's a part of it, in order to run those businesses. Even to have a housekeeping crew for one of these hotels downtown, you're gonna have to have a place for those people there, and you could build that into your plan. I think that that's a big part of it, and I also think that there's challenges there as far as the cost that they would, a hotel room that might run at $350 a night, for the housing portion of it, they're probably not gonna charge that same exact amount, so they're gonna have to charge a significantly lower amount to have somebody who's gonna stay in an apartment or a hotel room long-term. So.
One more. So we've talked a lot about single-family homes. That's sort of the American dream. A lot of us came up here and built our houses remote. And then we came up with this word sustainable housing, which is the opposite of single-family homes. What I see currently in a community that I lived in, Ballard, is single-family homes that raised families, 3 or 4 or 5 kids, are now being torn down and townhouses are built where there may be 4 2 or 3 bedroom facilities on the same size lot as as a single-family home. Is there any market for townhouses? Have you heard people talk about their willingness to look at that sort of housing structure? I know everybody wants a yard for their dog and stuff like that, but maybe not everybody. Have you heard any people talk about that they'd be interested in townhouses?
I think that if we had 10 townhouses here right now, people would look at them. They're gonna look at a cardboard box in the parking lot down the street too at this point. We have some pretty amazing contributors to this community that are running out of places to live as well. It's no joke when people call and they say, I'm coming to Seward because I have a potential for a job. I literally tell them, bring a tent.
Oh. I did that. And I'm still here.
Yeah, I think just to Bruce's point, I think the problem, because I own Logic, the problem with using it in the wintertime is that then you have to throw the people out come spring. And so that becomes an issue. So my question is, and I know you haven't seen the floor plan or the layout for the subdivision, but I'm wondering, what is your sense of people that would want to buy a family home in terms of buying it somewhere near multi-family housing? So could we take this Forest Acres subdivision and do a mixture of single-family homes and townhouses or other kinds of multi-dwelling buildings? Or is it the mindset of someone who's buying a single-family home that they don't want to be around that?
I find that a significant portion of people that are moving to Seward actually do prefer to have a little bit more elbow room. And you usually find people that are looking for a home inside city limits usually have come from a place where they've lived in that more urban areas, more densely populated areas. But I don't think that, having a fourplex next to a single-family home, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I don't think people would be opposed to something like that.
Okay, I'm just wondering how we get more out of that acreage, because we really we need more than 40 homes.
I definitely think that it would be advantageous to at least make sure that a few of those properties are zone multifamily, so that that would definitely be something that you need to consider in that project.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Mr. Walters.
Yes, would it be a help for the contractors and the builders if the city could change some of its codes for setback on the older city lots and go with some zero lot line situations?
I don't think that's necessarily something that's going to dictate whether or not that's, I don't think that's been something that's been a challenge for builders.
Okay, I was just thinking maybe it would open up more room for more.
We definitely want to hold true to making sure that the way that the neighborhoods look and things like that. I think that's really important, and to have a more densely populated area can kind of take away from the overall feel of the community as well.
Yeah, the more you crowd it, the quality of life goes downhill.
It'd be a bummer, yeah.
Any other questions? Thanks, John.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We're going to move to a presentation from Henry Burns, who is the principal of the, is it a secondary school here? Preschool.
Hello, everybody. I haven't met everybody, but I'm Henry, or Dr. Burns, whatever you want to call me. I guess came here in July, actually June. I was homeless for the first month, living in an RV down by the water. Put about 5 contracts on houses, didn't get a sniff. One house I put $100,000 on the table over the asking price, didn't get a sniff. My lease is up in 2 weeks, and I'm going to currently probably be living with a friend who's the middle school principal. So I am probably the prime example of a professional trying to find a home. Okay. Currently, I had 6 teachers decline employment with me this year. These are not like hourly jobs, these are $55,000 to $75,000 a year jobs, just based on housing, okay? Right now, we currently have a contract through, my nurse is retiring, there's a contract with the L, there's a lady that's brought in from New York, she's the nurse that's for the Seward area, I guess. No school psych. They bring a person over from the Kenai over for school psych. So yeah, when you talk about then my hourly employees, I have 2 of them that left over the middle school, and I currently have my secretary who is leaving April 1st. So those are my hourly employees. Obviously, the housing issues impacted them also. I have an employee who's leaving, who's a very high needs position. She's one of my sped teachers, and she's leaving because of housing. Her and her significant other are going back to Wisconsin. So when we look at my needs, currently I think I have for next year, contracts aren't back to me until the 10th of March. So I don't know our high needs or who's coming, who's staying, or whatever. But after the 10th, we'll decide, how we're gonna fill these vacancies. For us, I think declining enrollment means I have to let go teachers. In the last 5 years, if you look at the enrollment from 5 years ago, we are 100 kids more than we were at the elementary. It's just drastically gone down. My predecessor, when I first got the job, he's like, that's your #1 priority. I think we are right now, we're booked for the high school at 167. I could tell you right now, we don't have 167 kids at that school. We're probably like 140 something on the books right now. We have 122 kids. So you look at what the COVID has done, and I guess you say that the money, the situation for housing. I brought it to my superintendent, Mr. Holland. He's well aware of what's going on here in the Seward side. We're in talks with Abtech to maybe get some of their family dorms for when I hire employees, that they're not like me, struggling to find housing. I think that's a main problem. We bring in outside staff who are professionals, who have families, that it's dire needs. The state, if you haven't been paying attention to our site council or budget meeting we had last week through the county did a budget meeting for us over at the school, and right now I think that Kenai is like $7 million in the hole. They are, if you look at just the ESSER funds, ESSER is like COVID money for school systems, and they have ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 funds. ESSER 2 funds will be basically finished out this year, and ESSER 3 funds will be finished out next year. You look at the Kenai in general, they gave us a number like a little over 70 employees are being paid by ESSER funds. So when those, the district's point of view is through attrition, retirement, that's how they'll shrink those numbers. So on our side of the water here, we have 10 positions at the high school, middle, and L who are being paid by ESSER funds. That's 3 at the high, 3 at the middle, and 4 at the elementary. So in 2 years, there's going to be a significant budget crisis that we have to look at has not been addressed. I know you guys, when I would say I was homeless, they say, well, it's a rite of passage. Well, it shouldn't be that way, okay? I came here from North Pole, and it was, I came here as, my first introduction to Seward was July 4th weekend. I was like, holy smokes, where all these people come from? But now I look at the 5 houses I put contracts on, and nobody's living in them. So all those people that outbid me, they're all summer rentals and everything else. Same with the guy I'm renting a house from. I don't blame him at all. He's trying to make money just the same as everybody else is. Okay, but for me, when I try to hire somebody, And their first question to me is, well, where am I gonna live? That's definitely an issue. I think you look at our enrollment, and hopefully, I know that the plans here for housing, I'm looking probably 18 months down the line. That puts me in that 2-year window that I can get families in. Now, obviously, I would love people to come here with 4 or 5 kids. That'd be great per family. But I have to be realistic. And I think for me, as the employer of about 26 people at the high school, I have to look at basically how can I run a school. And what's dictated to me by the keen eye is enrollment. And enrollment dictates teachers. So, right now I think we're budgeted next year for 7 or 9 teachers, depending on where their funding comes from. But it is definitely an issue. I know, I've been saying this to my bosses, since I got the job. It's like, listen, I can't do math, science, special ed. Those are all high need, high wanted jobs. The only reason I could hire those 2 people that I figured out how to hire them was, one was a prior student. His parents had a house here that he could live at. And the other one was a person in Hawaii who I stole. And she came here because her husband owns a sightseeing business here in Hawaii. So there's not really a thing where I can look at bringing somebody else in from out of state or, whatever. It is definitely an issue. I appreciate you guys, give me the time to talk and, yeah. That's it.
Questions? Go ahead.
So hypothetically, if you had a teacher you wanted to hire on and they had a family and a spouse that working for like city job or a charter or something like that, what price range would you think they would be able to afford?
Well, I can tell you this, I make over $100,000 a year and I can't afford the house that was just listed down the street. And my teachers make, beginning teacher right out of college is making about 55. One with experiences around 75 grand. I can't do the math. She'd probably know more than I could about what they would, qualify for. But I think when you look at, so I take the instance, my new teacher here that I hired this year, she's leaving. She's making around 55 grand a year, right? And she can't afford to find a place. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Are you aware of any discussions that the borough has ever had about possibly building some housing for teachers over here? They own land over here.
Correct. So I mentioned 3 times first off, when I first talked to my bosses, I was like, listen, buy an RV. I got plenty of plugs over at the school. Plug them in. We could be good to go for temporary housing. Well, that was shot down because of cost effectiveness. I understand. Then now my boss is in talks with Avtech about the housing for their dorms over there. It comes to the point where I'm looking at, I got a teacher now who's, during the summertime, he's going to be without a house. So I was like, listen, park your RV at the school, plug it in, you can do what you need to do. But for year-round employment, I have 3 people that are on my staff. For year-round employment, they leave during the summertime. So,
Because the housing they're in throws them out. Okay.
Correct. For me, it's April 1st. I'm throwing out April 1st. So, I say throwing out, I mean, it's just, obviously I signed the contract because I was looking for a house. But I think if you look at, the bigger picture, I've mentioned to the superintendent over there, is that, listen, if we could put temporary housing somewhere on campus, this is before the idea of Avtech came on, but it has to be, because next year I'm looking at hiring maybe hopefully 2 or 3 people. These are all high need people, high need professionals, math, science, and special ed. That's just me at the high school. I'm not talking the middle or elementary. So, yeah.
Any questions?
Well, first of all, I can't imagine the pressure that you're under. Your expression of the dire conditions that you are finding
Yeah.
is distressing, and maybe something we should have heard right at the very beginning. It doesn't matter, we're hearing it along the way, and if you had the idea that any of us treat this as casual, nobody does. I think students and what we want for our community are the most important thing we can do. You're in the most important business that I can imagine. With that, and to follow up on what Board Member Paquette said, I work all through the bush in Alaska, and in most school districts, there's housing available for the teachers, provided by the school district. I've lived with teachers in armories and every other place. So what is, I mean, physical structure has to be built, but why is our Kenai Peninsula Borough School system not able to do that?
That's a good question. That's way above my pay grade.
Well, you must have had a discussion.
Yes.
And could you enlighten us a little bit about some of the problems?
I think obviously we're still on the road system, we're not in the bush. I think when they look at, when I mentioned to them about the RVs or anything like that, and obviously building permits, and is it going to be stationary or is it going to be permanent? I was even like, listen, I'll buy an RV, or I'll put my RV over there and buy another RV, put it up there, at least I can house some people. Because for me, I was like, I look at, how am I going to attract, a science teacher? How am I going to attract a math teacher? How am I going to attract a special needs teacher? Who currently, if you don't know, in the middle school, they don't have any special needs. So we have two at our high school, and they have an aide there that I think that she's leaving soon. But I don't know the circumstances on that, but, the middle, high, and elementary, they share resources. And I think there's a huge property over there that could be built, where the middle school used to be, at least that's what I'm thinking. That would be my target, be right there. I've been in places where they did wheel in the double wide and put it down, and but I think it just comes down to money.
This isn't so much a question, but more directed towards the board. It seems like two of you have said, why not get the borough to do this? And I feel like it's certainly not his job to do that, but maybe the city to talk to the borough. We saw that there is land in the borough, inside city limits, that's borough owned, so it seems like it's something we need to really, I didn't know any of this, how dire it is, and it seems like this is something that needs to be like on the forefront of what we're trying to do, and get the borough to look at some land to do what Bruce is talking about and have housing that's provided for teachers, so that we can educate the youth that's in this town and attract more families. And so I think we should think about that as being a focus for us.
Along the lines of housing for teachers, you did mention we're on the road system, but
yeah.
I mean, it's infeasible to commute from any place where there's affordable housing to teach. I mean, Moose Pass is even more expensive than Seward in a lot of cases. Is there a way to get the Kenai Borough to understand that we have similar needs to remote rural communities in regards to housing?
I believe Mr. Holland is aware of that, and leadership is trying to work out something. But yeah, they are definitely aware of what's going on. I put if you ever gone to one of our site council meetings, that's one of our topics every month. And that's through the community here, and I've shared our concerns, all three principals have shared their concerns with our leadership over in the Kenai.
One more follow-up. Seward is not alone. Are you aware of this problem in other communities, Homer and Willock, or?
Same thing.
Same thing?
Same thing. Homer's the cool thing, I guess, you look at the big spectrum is Homer and Seward are almost identical when we look at the crisis for housing. I think if you look at just with the teachers there, I don't want to speak for the principal over there, but I know they're having the same thing, issues that we're having here.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you
for your
so
time.
much, really.
Okay, so our next presentation is going to be the heat loop project presentation by Andy Baker. We were calling him in, is that correct?
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Burns. Thank you, Jenna.
Thank you.
Jenna.
Please dial the authorization.
Hey, it's Andy.
Hi, Andy, it's Brenda. You are with PACCAB.
Okay.
And we've got your first slide up on the, so you just go ahead and start.
Okay, can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, this is Andy Baker from Your Clean Energy. I've got 10 minutes, and I'm going to quickly go through an update for all of you on the heat loop project. So I'm looking at the slides that I sent in. There's 9 slides, and I'm going to go through those slides. I just want to make sure everybody has those in front of them.
Yes, and it's on the screen in the room as well.
Okay, great. Great. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to the new pack of people, new people in the city who may not have been here when this project emerged back in 2015 and went through various phases. It's been a good road and a long one, and now there are some real opportunities opening up to fund the balance of this project. And it's a big buzz because it's clean energy, moving heat from the bay into city building, using CO2 heat pumps. All of that excitement has come out now, and the federal money is flowing down to Alaska and straight from the Fed. So I want to just go over the project quickly and then talk about those grant opportunities. I'm going to jump right to slide 3, if you will. That's really the big picture here. That photograph, the aerial photograph of Seward. It kind of tells you the story of why this project came about. The Sea Life Center there already has an intake where we're using seawater from Resurrection Bay, which is extraordinarily warm. It gets warm seawater from the North Pacific Gyre. It's really a gift from heaven that every November the bay can reach as warm as 54 degrees, and the big bathtub fills up with hot water right before winter, and you have this bay that never freezes and plenty of heat to run heat pumps at a very high efficiency. What spurred interest in the city project was the fact that that same seawater is rising and falling and flushing through the deep gravel along the bike path. And so we wanted to get that heat and move it to buildings. We looked at an innovative way of doing that, which is to put vertical loops down in the gravel by the bike path, have a closed loop, and bring that heat to the buildings. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. But you can see that the geography of Seward is really perfect for the project, and that's why it's held station for so long. Go to slide 4. This is a site plan. This was a conceptual site plan, the latest one before we did the design, final design. But essentially shows you what is the project. If you look on the far right, you'll see the vertical loop holes along the bike path. Those would all be interconnected to a set of 4-inch pipes, supply and return, that would run back to the library, where heat pumps would extract that heat. And the magic of this project and the innovation of it is that that's one big closed loop that we pump from the library. The cold water would flow down towards the waterfront and go down those vertical loops that be 240 feet deep. And those loops are dipping well into the seawater, flushing back and forth in the gravel. We drilled a test well in 2015, that's the orange dot, to prove that what was down there, we found there was warm seawater in the top 240 feet moving back and forth. So by running one pump, it could be as small as 3.5 horsepower, we can move heat from the tidal zone right back to the library and then lift it with a heat pump. There's 2 options that we looked at. One is heating the library and the annex. That's the 2-building option. The 4-building option would be to add the city hall and the fire hall to the project. In terms of cost, one thing you can notice right away, there's a lot more street cuts and sidewalk to get pipes over to city hall and the fire hall. And the most economic version of the project is the 2-building version. And that may be the best one to start with as a demonstration. It could be expanded, but it will give you the best return and may have the most interest for the grant agencies. I am going to have you go to the next slide, 5. There are 2 elements or features of the project that are very innovative and very attractive to grant agencies, and they also demonstrate a new way of running a district heat pump system. The first is the deep gravel that I showed you along the bike path. There's a section cut by USGS right after the earthquake, and there's about 300 feet of sand and gravel right underneath the Branson Pavilion and the bike path. It's very porous, and it's come out of Lowell Creek over thousands of years. And at high tide, the warm seawater flushes in through that gravel. Low tide, it moves back out. So on the right side of your screen, you'll see this double loop technology. It's simply HDPE loops that dip down, they go down to the bottom, turn around, and go back up. We can get 2 loops in each 6-inch hole and harness a lot of that heat, source heat, by drilling the hole and dropping those loops in and pulling out the casing, and then you've got loops in the gravel right in the water. That eliminates the need to pump seawater and deal with marine life and fouling and corrosion and boats and anchors and storms and so forth. A much, much, much lower cost way to get the seawater source heat up to the library. Next slide is number 6. And you will see a familiar face there. And this is the 4 CO2 heat pumps at the Alaska Sea Life Center that were installed in the grant project in late 2015. And they have continued to operate successfully. They basically are taking the heat from seawater and lifting it up to 194 degrees in a single pass, which is much warmer than you'll get from a conventional heat pump. The heat pumps use CO2, it's a natural refrigerant. If you have a small leak or something, it's not a big deal, it's not toxic, it can be sequestered by a tree. And the important point, though, is they will make that lift to 194 with the 250% to 300% efficiency, starting with the warm seawater from Resurrection Bay. That's pretty impressive when you compare that to a 85% oil boiler or 100% electric boiler. And that's where the savings comes in that will pay back the city investment in the project. Next slide is number 7. The project has 4 primary benefits, and they're really pretty strong. First one, reduce the cost of heating these city buildings during the long subarctic winter. So as it turns out, Resurrection Bay is warmest in the winter, and it stays warm on the coldest days. If it's -5 degrees outside, that bay is still well above 40 in most cases. So we can keep extracting heat at a high efficiency from that source. That resource is totally renewable. It's an immense source of heat. Also, as we take heat out of the bay, we're cooling it, and that's a good thing. It is starting to slowly warm up, and that's affecting the marine ecosystem. By switching to the CO2 heat pumps, we'd be offsetting the burning of heating oil for the most part in the library and the other buildings. That means your carbon emissions are basically cut or reduced. That's an environmental advantage, and there's also now a market for carbon credits, which could likely be leveraged to get some annual income for maintenance. The last point, this is using this advanced technology, emerging technology, which the grant agencies love. The CO2 heat pump is a natural refrigerant, already proven in town, in your town. Will not leak toxic greenhouse gas synthetic refrigerants into the atmosphere, which is happening with many, many heat pumps. It's becoming a big problem. It's something that's a liability you can completely avoid with this design. Next slide, slide 8. This is a executive summary that was taken directly from the 2020 final design memo for the project, where we looked at the economics of 2 building, 3 building, 4 building option. You can see the highlight there. That would be to serve the library and the city annex. The project had an independent cost opinion done by HMS in Anchorage in 2020. And the 2 building option, came in at $1.44 million. I recommended to the city that the cost estimate for these options be updated to 2022 for the current cost conditions. The project could be built in 2022 or most likely 2023. Need to know what that number now looks like if you're applying for a grant. What the city already has in hand is a $725,000 ADA grant as a match to additional grant funds. So that's the basic economics. And again, the 2 building option has a better return than trying to serve 3 or 4. Okay, let's go to the last slide, number 9. So the exciting news here, and when I say exciting, it's been a pretty long dry spell for federal funds flying into Alaska at the rate they are now because of the change in presidents and interest in clean energy. There are 2 grant opportunities that came on the radar literally early last week. I got an email from the National Renewable Energy Lab. They had seen this project in the news and saw my name, and they reached out and said, hey, we've got a demonstration district heat grant that we're looking for projects for. It's for renewable energy heating, does require match funds, but the application is March 18th, which is pretty fast. And so part of your lay down is the actual grant, the information, the funding opportunity announcement. It does look like a really good match, and the city manager and assistant city manager have seen this. They're already in contact with those folks. And Stephen, I think, is there. He could speak more in a minute to what their intentions are with that grant. The other good news is just in late January, the Denali Commission, which was established by Senator Ted Stevens as a way to send or appropriate federal money to projects in rural Alaska, they received $75 million from the Infrastructure Act that was passed by Congress just recently. That money is for fiscal year 2023. The commissioners are still deciding what to do with it. However, last year, they did fund the design of a CO2 heat pump system in Sitka. They liked it. They're becoming familiar with the technology and the project, so they are going to be interested in probably hearing from the city about the grant opportunity. However, the fiscal year 2023 money allocations within the Denali Commission are not going to probably be established until June or July. So that's a grant opportunity that's further down the road than the immediate one, first one. And that's what's happening. So I'm going to stop there, and if there are any questions about the project, I'm happy to take them, or questions about strategies for the grant applications, and then, as I said, Stephen could probably fill in on what the city might want to do.
Thanks. We'll take some questions. There are some from the board members, but I had just a question for clarification before we go further into conversation. I saw discussions about 2, 3, and 4 building loops. Is 2 buildings still an option?
Yes. The sticking point with the NREL grant is, and this is really semantics, they're asking for a demonstration district energy system that will heat multiple buildings. So what they're interested in mostly is the technology and the method, more than trying to serve, many more buildings. District heating systems, typically you try to connect everybody and anybody that's close by, whether they're city or not, because you need all those connections for economics. What we are trying to do here is demonstrate the method of moving that heat from that gravel into the library, and then using those heat pumps to satisfy those heat loads. And if they will accept 2 buildings as a multiple building system, then you're in. And that has yet to be determined, but it's certainly a reasonable request for the scope of the project that we have here.
Thanks. Member Walkers, do you have a question?
Yeah, I do, and I, don't get me wrong, I really support this idea and this project, but I don't want to see it not work very good or not work and be not really utilized. We've had some stuff in the past, like Pelican Wheel electric environmental friendly projects that were granted and funded and really didn't get used, and because of technical problems that weren't foreseen before they were put in, your water intake is going to come from wells punched in through the gravel, and unless you've already addressed this, then stop me, but the seawater would come in through the gravel and you'd be getting basically salt water up from Resurrection Bay. That's the understanding I got from what you said, and I wanted to point out that this project is 1 block south of the old water flow, the old riverbed from the Low Canyon Creek that came out. There's this alluvial fan that a lot of this town's built on came out of Lowell Canyon. there's a lot of water coming out of Lowell Canyon that is not on the surface. And because we have very porous gravel and sand, which you're assuming will let the seawater in, that also has this year-round water table flow downhill towards the bay. So I wondered if you've done any studies to see if you're going to get salt water or fresh water or a mixture, and it'll probably change over the year as the volume of water out of Lowell Canyon comes. And that, I would assume Lowell Canyon water would be quite a bit cooler than Resurrection Bay. So that would also affect your engineering. And so I wanted to bring that out so that I felt like that had been addressed. That they knew really what was going on down there, 200-300 feet in the gravel. That's it.
Yes, that's an excellent question. So the test well that was installed in 2015, what they did was they drove 6-inch casing down 300 feet. They baled the gravel out of the center of the casing, then dropped a 4-inch screened PVC well pipe down there, and then they pulled the casing out. So what we have is a 4-inch water column going down 300 feet with slots. So what's moving in and out of that well is the groundwater. And so Stephen Nelson helped me. We rented a castaway probe, and he did multiple measurements at different times of the year and of the tide cycle to measure the temperature and salinity down that hole. And what we found out was, yes, there's definitely fresh water sitting on top of the seawater. So in summer to all the way to early winter, if that fresh water is warmer, when you get from late winter into spring, it's the coolest. However, that layer is pretty thin. The dominant layer that we're penetrating and dipping into is warm seawater, which is influencing that water column down to about 240 feet. Below that, it just gets colder and more salty. The water table starts at about 20 feet below ground, depending on the tides. And then there's a couple feet of fresh water, depending on the tide levels. That it could go from a couple feet to maybe 10 feet of fresh water if the tide's at high tide, pushing that water back. And then the rest of it is warm salt water. So one of the things that we will learn from the project is just exactly how that works, but we have a lot of confidence from those measurements that the warm salt water is what's dominating that water column. And at times, the fresh water may cool down the source a little bit. At times, it may warm it up warmer than the seawater. But overall, the resource is fantastic for extracting heat with a closed loop.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, Andy, for the presentation. My question is more of an engineering nature, but I am very much in strong support of this project. I guess you would call it a well field where you have multiple penetrations into the ground for the loop system to go into. Are those like 4-inch holes or 6-inch holes? Are you going to do the same thing that you did with the test well, drive down casing, put perforated pipe in, and then retact the casing and put the tubing down inside those pipes? Is that how it's going to be, or is it something different?
You're close. If you go back to slide number 5, the method that would be used is we drag 6-inch casing down to 245 feet. We bail that well, we slide that double loop assembly downhole with the weight on the bottom that would hold it down, fill that loop with water so it doesn't float out, and then the contractor will slowly jack up the casing. And as he jacks it up, the gravel formation around will fall into the hole and around those pipes. So when we're all done, those pipes will be basically, buried in gravel, loose gravel, all the way down. And so the water movement from the ties will be immediate contact with them. There's also an option for trying to fill the space in the middle with pea gravel, but the problem is you can get, when you try to pull the casing out, that can start creating a lot of friction. We want to be able to pull that casing out easily without breaking. You know, when you're pulling a string that's 245 feet long, there's a lot of tension in the weld. So the method would be pull that casing out, let the gravel just collapse around those pipes, and then you end up with, you know, loops underwater. They're held in place. You know, this is a 50 to 100 year design. It'll be in there. When that well field is finished, you won't see anything on the surface. It'll go back to the same yard that you have now. All of that piping will be a minimum of 6 feet underground.
Yeah, quick question. I thought you were gonna have metal casing all the way down. If you're just gonna have the intake in it and return pipes in the ground, you're aware that this gravel alluvial fan is moving different amounts, and it's really a small amount. It's a lot slower than a glacier, and it depends how much shaking we have. A small little shake will maybe make it move, but it's moving. It's not like static like bedrock. So if you have softer plumbing down in there, and after 10, 15 years, the gravel shifted 6-8 inches over, aren't you going to start getting pinched off?
That's possible. We didn't have any evidence that gravel was moving like that. I think one of the bigger concerns was if you had a seismic event, you could shear some of the shoreline off again to the ocean. I mean, that gravel's been sitting there, you know, it's come down from Lowell Creek and piled up. Yes, if it was seriously moving, you know, we'd see that. We haven't seen that with the well that we put in. That's a PVC well. We're not aware it's deflecting. It's definitely something we can look at. That risk seems to be pretty low. I mean, if the whole thing is sliding, it would all slide together, you know, unless there's some layer that's moving, you know, faster than another. But thank you for bringing that up. That's a risk that, you know, is not really a big one on our radar screen, or would prevent, you know, putting the loops in.
You should
There's going to be some movement. The HDPE pipe is, you know, pretty flexible, but it it couldn't take a big shift, but I'm not aware that we're seeing one there.
Talk to the electrical utilities on some of their bigger power poles that they put in gravel around this state. You'll see that after 20 years, those poles are leaning. And part of that is due to sometimes the gravel moving underneath. So it does happen at a real slow rate, but it can affect this kind of plumbing because you have everything's really close. So I don't know if it could tolerate in 20 years, if the gravel creeps over 6-8 inches, would your plumbing tolerate that?
It certainly could be designed to, you know, with expansion, fitting. That's something we could engineer. I think the vertical loops will probably be fine, but maybe some of the manifold piping, that could be a consideration. But, you know, again, that's something we have to look harder at as we get closer to the project.
Thank you.
Thanks, Andy. Is there any more questions?
Yes, this is Board Member Smith. Are you looking at this as a 100% replacement for current diesel use in the buildings? Is what strikes me on this plan here is it's single point of failure critical. Any one piece goes down and the whole system is going to be down. And kind of recognizing some of this is kind of exotic technology at the time, you know, maybe it'll be more common, but I don't know if you can, how long does it take to get a replacement CO2 compressor, for example? So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Yeah, as far as the equipment goes, the technology is now mature in Europe and Japan, and now it's emerging in the U.S. The suppliers can change out a compressor in a day or two. The library is a fantastic place for this project for two reasons. The first one is one you brought up, and that is, what about redundancy? Well, the library has an oil boiler and an electric boiler. This system will become the primary source of heat. If it should go down for any reason, then the oil boiler will automatically kick on and take over. If the oil boiler goes down for some reason, then the electric boiler will automatically kick on and take over. So we're increasing the redundancy of the heating system. And that's the smartest thing to do when you have a project like this where we absolutely need reliability. And heat pumps are often run like that. They're your first source of heat. If for some reason they can't satisfy the heat load, you have secondary that kicks in. And that's how the Sea Life Center operates. As far as the repairs and support, there's another angle that's developing here in town, and that is, I have been in conversation with Kathy LeCompte at Avtech. I think you work there, Ben, and there's this idea that if the city pursues this project and gets these CO2 heat pumps, there's also this idea of Avtech, who now teaches refrigeration, ammonia and synthetic refrigeration, perhaps to get a grant and get some of these CO2 heat pumps and start training people on CO2 heat pumps, so that eventually you have people in town who really know the systems, they know the technology, and you're going to have a lot more capacity to service them, and not always have to bring people from Anchorage or Seattle. Teach people how these work. There are different bicycles, but they work fantastically. So it's a new bicycle. It's not a scary bicycle. It's one that's well proven and well established. What's unique about this project is connecting this closed tidal loop to the CO2 heat pumps and deriving all those benefits. And that's why the grant funding agencies are pretty interested in the project.
Thanks, Andy. Yeah, we'll take one more, but we've got a pretty full agenda still, so we need to make this the last one.
Okay, hopefully this won't light a fire necessarily, but number one, we know, or maybe the board doesn't know, that this is a two-component system. The library uses low temperature heating, but the annex uses high temperature heating. So once we go to high temperature heating and we have both systems available, why aren't we pushing for 4 buildings? Why is there not a complete desire to go for the whole shebang and not scale it back to just 2 buildings?
That's a great question. And I'm somewhat agnostic about it because it depends on what the city wants to do. As I mentioned before, the cost of extending those pipes to the city hall and fire hall are pretty high. It's really expensive now to cut the street or cut the sidewalk and replace it. You've got utilities in the ground. To answer your question about temperature, the library has medium temperature and low temperature heating appliances. The boiler makes heat at 180 degrees in that library. It's not down at 130, it's at 180. And then it's cascaded down to serve various coils and finally down to radiant floor in the slab inside the building. And so even if we only have the library and the annex, we will be able to make use of that medium temperature or 180 degree heat to go to the annex, and then it will go to the library system, which will then cascade it down. And the ultimate additional heat load that you could add to that library to make this system really more efficient and more beneficial would be when you replace the sidewalks outside, put tubes in the sidewalk for snow melt. Snow melt is a great application for heat pumps. You can literally get that energy for almost free because the CO2 heat pumps don't cost you very much more when your return temperature is drawn down by a low temperature load. They love that, and that's why the Sea Life Center system is so efficient. So having the 194 output gives you the option of the 2 building or 4 building, but the 2 building will demonstrate both medium temperature and low temperature, and then you have the future option for outdoor slab heat, which would give you a tremendous bang for the buck for that heat pump heat.
Thanks, Andy. I really appreciate your information and taking the time to call in and address this body. We're going to move on to the next.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Andy.
Okay, you're welcome.
Okay, bye-bye.
Yep, sure. Pleasure.
So the next item on our agenda is a presentation on childcare from Casey Warner.
Hi, I'm Casey Warner. I am the program developer with Happy Youth Programs and Educational Resources. We are a program under Suicide Prevention Coalition. So I'm gonna kind of talk over some of the things that I presented to City Council at the January 24th meeting. These are the slides here that I prepared for that presentation. I'll talk over them. Some things have kind of changed. There's been some updates, so you guys will hear some of that today. So some of our current barriers in Seward in addressing childcare is we have a shortage in early childhood education workforce. Our ECE educator, our wages are not necessarily living wages, so it's not a job a lot of people go into because it's profitable. We are looking at a state and federal level. A lot of the funds are not currently being allocated for child care capital projects, or the few that are out there, Seward does not meet the requirements for. There's not a whole lot of funding at the moment being allocated for child care deserts. Seward is a child care desert. And increased access to quality and affordable child care is something that is on the state's strategic plan, and I've been advocating and working with them. You guys will hear a little bit more on future slides on that piece. So our early childhood education workforce, one of the things that we could do here locally is encourage our Seward High School students to enroll in the Kenai Peninsula School District's Child Development course. They use a program called Education Student Rising. I have spoken with the district about maybe working with them and the high school students and doing a program so our students can earn early childhood education, do some hands-on work. I was referred to this Education Student Rising program that's part of the district. Something else that could happen here locally is providing technical and financial support to those interested in completing their CDA. They can do that contacting me directly. I can get them contacted with resources. So any interested individuals can work with Thread and myself for financial supports and attending university classes for select trainings on ECE and obtaining a CDA. For educator wages, this is a model that is very close to my heart. I've been talking about it since I learned about it in 2018. Juneau implemented a program called HEARTS, Hiring, Educating, and Retaining Teaching Staff. So it's something that their city did. What they do is individuals that are working in a licensed child care program can apply for a tiered education incentive. So they have 3 tiers depending on the individual's level of education. In ECE, they essentially get a bonus twice a year to help boost up the living wage there. So I've been advocating with our state partners at CCPO and other groups that I'm a part of at the state, and seeing if this is something that could be implemented potentially statewide. The state is looking at doing, CCPO had it on some of their plan, on one of their strategic plans, with some of the ARPA and CRSA funds to doing a piloted tiered reimbursement incentives, but specifically for those infant and toddler care slots, and increasing reimbursements to providers to a higher percentile, so increasing the amount that the state will pay per child care slot. So I've been doing a lot of advocating for funding to get allocated for child care capital projects. Looking for resources to come down for childcare deserts within Alaska, and doing those things will help us increase access to quality and affordable childcare. Some conversations that I've been having is there's a initiative up in Anchorage called the Anchorage Preschool Project. What they're looking at doing is taking a percentage of the marijuana tax funds to support a universal pre-K program for the Anchorage area. I've talked a little bit about what this might look like on the Kenai Peninsula. Some of the numbers are a lot lower than I would have anticipated, but that's something that I'm still exploring and having conversations around. Other pathways to success. So some of this has kind of already happened now from the slide. I have had a meeting with Kellyanne and her supervisor talking about what some of the supports the Small Business Association could lend to individuals here in Seward looking at starting their own childcare business. And so something that is upcoming, I haven't done a full, I'm going to be launching the week of the 14th of March. We'll be launching a startup program, or a startup grant funds for interested individuals in the Seward area that want to start their own child care business. I'm specifically kind of expecting to have more applications from individuals wanting to do in-home care. However, if there was somebody that wanted to open up a larger facility and do the child care, they can still, of course, apply for those grant funds. And so that's just kind of what I've been doing on my end. I am a local resource here in Seward. Anybody that's interested in kind of pursuing this field of early childhood and supporting our local economy, please reach out to me. I've got a lot of state partners at the moment that I'm talking to. I've been working directly with CCPO, our Child Care Program Office. And the next slide is my contact information. If anybody wants to talk with me one-on-one, I'm always available.
Thank you for the term childcare desert. That's very helpful. The program in Juneau, how do they fund it? Do you know?
I'm not 100%. That would be something that I would have to look into. When I first heard about the program, it was something around their general, somewhere in their general funds it came out of, but I don't know what that looks like now.
Yeah, I want to thank you for all your work on this issue. My daughter left town. I got 4 grandkids, and one of the biggest reasons they left is she couldn't really find a full-time job and have child care for the kids. So it comes close to my heart on this, so I appreciate it a lot, and hang in there.
I had a question. You've been here through the whole meeting. You heard Dr. Burns speak about both, of course, the housing problem, but the changing population. And are you seeing any kind of a similar pattern? And as Fred said, or Board Member Welker said, there's several kids that left. Are you seeing that happening?
Through my work with Harper, I wouldn't say that I would be seeing that. I would say through some of my other things that I'm in, I have 2 very small long-term rental units. Most of my individuals that rent for me are young couples. They have babies and they leave. My 2 units, those individuals are getting ready to move. They both recently had babies within the last 3 months, and one's moving to Sedona. So I'm definitely seeing that in some of the other spaces that I sit in, but I don't have any numbers around this piece. Something that I did want to just let the board know, if nobody's heard some of my other presentations and wasn't included in this, Seward has a 78% deficit in licensed childcare options. We currently have it's about an estimated 200 to 250 kids in the 0 to 5 year range in Seward. And we only have a total of 20 licensed childcare spots, and that's between 2 in-home licensed providers. In my 2020 survey, 56% of individuals that participated used informal care. And in the 2021 survey that I held, 27% of families were using staggered schedules or leaving one parent out of the workforce to stay home with the kids. And so that's definitely some big stuff that is affecting our economy. Kind of linking it with the housing, these two things kind of need to go hand in hand. I mean, people aren't going to afford our housing if they can't live and raise their families here. If they can't live and raise their families here, they're not going to buy our houses. So I think it just really is going to end up being, what type of town do we want to be? Do we want to cater to seasonal economy and the seasonal market, or do we want to support our families and our young children that want to call Seward their home?
Good point. Good point.
Yeah, all those kids, that's the future of this town, so.
They're going to buy those houses.
Thank you, Cassie.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Seeing no other questions, we'll move on to new business. The minutes were approved on the consent agenda, and the next on our agenda is the input on the capital improvement plan. I don't know how many people went through this before the meeting, but there's quite a bit on here, and we are getting very short on time. So is there anybody that wants to speak to anything specifically in this capital improvement plan, either members or from administration?
Madam Chair, unless there's a time issue to respond to the city with this, I would propose that we move this to a different meeting, because this deserves a look.
I'll second it.
Discussion about that. I guess my first question would be, is there a time, is this time sensitive to get back to the city? Does anybody know?
Well, we're gonna start the budget process here soon, so.
When is soon?
So the budget will be, the 2023-2024 budget will be adopted next, well, we'll start working on it, I would say, late summer, so you definitely have time.
Okay. Thank you. Any more discussion about the motion on the floor?
Your May 4th meeting right now is empty,
Okay.
so that'd be a good suggestion.
Okay.
Nay? No. Okay.
Should we amend his motion to move it to that date?
I can just add it to it, yeah.
Any more discussion on that? Call for the vote.
Okay, voting to postpone this to May. Jeffa?
Yes.
Paquette?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
Wilkers?
Yes.
Lawrence?
Yes.
Hughes?
Yes.
Chair Hombell?
Yes.
That is approved.
Okay, so with that, our new business is done. Next on the agenda is information items and reports.
Madam Chair, if I might,
yes.
could I ask what the board envisions in terms of working through the CIP process? I'm just trying to think about whether it would be prudent to have department heads who can probably answer very, very specific technical questions or something of that sort. Could you just provide clarity on what type of dialogue and in what capacity you want to work through the list?
Understood. Is there any discussion on this from somebody who has participated in this process before? It's new to me, so I'm not sure what has been done in the past.
Madam Chair, I think primarily Public Works, and we work at the Harbor all the time with Public Works and Electrical Department, would to be able to advise us on their immediate needs and goals. You know, if I might, these might be just a simple, you know, no questions asked, but you know, certainly at this time, I don't think this board has, unless we're going to extend our meeting today, we're not going to be able to do anything other than just a nod on this thing.
So is the intention to review current projects and discuss the merits of them remaining on the list or need for additional projects, or what's the, I guess, if any clarity you can provide on what the dialogue should entail?
This is in our packet to review and comment on, essentially. There's no resolution here, so it's not a vote, but if we're going to comment on it, we need to go through it. And I think, you know, just saying 4 pages is okay to us is not something we can do today.
Right.
I think it's just a matter of allowing people the time to read through it and the time to discuss it as a body, which I feel like if we start to discuss this now, and the board is in agreement that there will be questions that come up that we just won't have time to address.
And just ask, if you want to requesting a certain department head, let us know so we can make sure that they're here.
Absolutely. Okay, so moving forward, we have our meeting schedule, our priorities and goals are in the packet. Any questions on those at this point in time? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on. Citizens' comments. We do not have any citizens in the room. So I'm assuming there's nobody in the audience that wishes to speak. Board and administration comments. We'll start on this end.
Thank you. I think we learned today that the housing issue might be a lot more urgent and in a greater depth than we even imagined. The discussion by Dr. Burns pretty much lays out that people making 6 figures are priced out of the market in Seward. And my concern is that people making $20,000, $50,000, $100,000 a year are also priced out of the market. This is the foundational bedrock of this community, and with what information from Ms. Werner there, a mortgage and a child care bill every month is going to max most people out. And I think this is something that government boards like this, council, planning and zoning, all have input on and can shape. And I think this is an important moment in the history of this community to recognize that we have an issue here that needs to be addressed immediately before we run everybody out. And I think that that's going to happen a lot faster than we might anticipate here. So I definitely want to continue that conversation in future meetings and work sessions, but I do see there's a real sense of urgency there for our aspiring families and existing families in this community. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm in firm agreement with Board Member Smith. It's all tied together. Housing, this education system up at our school with, and families with children. It's all tied together. If you don't have housing, teachers with children, people with children, they're not going to stay. And I think one of the things as a board maybe that we could do that, maybe we need to talk to the Kenai Peninsula Borough about making some property available. Maybe solve one thing to start with, you know, for the construction of housing for our teachers. I think that's I mean, all my children are adults, but my grandchildren aren't yet. And it sure would be nice if they were able to have teachers quality teachers that could stay because they had adequate housing. So, and the borough, if the borough's sitting on land they're not going to do anything with, we should probably consider making an approach to that.
I agree with everything that's already been said. I want to thank everybody that came today. It was very informational meeting today. So thank you to all the speakers. In looking at the minutes, I'm reminded of something. In the resolution that failed, in the Resolution 222 or 2022-03 about telephonic attendance, I asked for a cost estimate on Zoom, and I did get that. But I wrote back and I never got a response, because it's not just the software, and the thing is that we can use something else, like Microsoft Teams, as far as I know, is a way to teleconference, video conference, and there are no fees. The issue becomes the IT personnel time, and that's a price that I haven't heard. So I think that's the bigger piece of it, to know whether we could bring this resolution back in an altered form, would be to know what would it cost staff-wise to have that support. And then I encourage planning and zoning to consider what can be done about the many, many homes that are being bought in the city that are not being used for year-round housing. This is not a unique situation. There are towns like Telluride, Colorado, and many other similar towns that have gone through this same business of, once Airbnbs showed up, the whole sort of thing changed. And as a municipality, we need to figure out how to get our arms back around it. So I don't know how we can help with that, but I see that as a really big thing that needs to be looked at. And with that, I'm complete. Thank you.
Member Walker?
Yeah, I'm new to the board, so I apologize, I'm not up to speed on everything, and there's more involved than I realized, so I've got a steep learning curve, and so please have some patience, I'll catch up.
Everything that everybody has said, I agree with 100%. Welcome to the board.
Thank you.
I think that clearly housing has been an issue. We've been talking about it. I feel like 5 years ago, we talked about SMIC constantly, trying to get it rolling, and everything is going great over there. And I think that, we have a strong board, and we need to keep moving in the right direction. And I think that there are hurdles that the city can help with to keep the cost down of those houses. And I think that building right now is expensive. Price of lumber per 10,000 board feet or whatever it is insane compared to what it was 3 years ago. And maybe that'll come down, and that'll help to get out of the $250 a square foot for building that Jenna was talking about. But I think that the city's taking the step in the right direction by looking at the Hemlock Subdivision. And yes, there's a lot of citizens that don't like the idea. There's a lot of citizens that do. There's got to be somewhere in the middle that everybody can meet, and we can get something that's beneficial to the town. And I especially agree with what Linda was saying. There's code violators in this town for sure with Airbnbs and VRBOs, and everyone knows that there's no enforcement of that. And I think that if we could figure out a way to help with that, that could bring a lot of single-family homes back into the real estate market. I think it's something that, whether it's P&Z or if we have some sort of enforcement take place in town, I think it could be beneficial.
Board Member Jaffa?
Yeah, Board Member Walker, I appreciate your careful and precise questioning, and you've already brought a lot to the board. So don't worry about how you're moving forward with it. I thought this was a great meeting tonight. Today, the presenters, of course, 4 varied presenters with different issues. It gives us a great chance to get into a lot of things. A lot of information becomes available to us. I'd also like to thank the city administration. I'm aware, and I think some of it is in your packet, of the amount of time that they have put into this heat loop project just in the last few weeks. I think it has helped move this thing forward, bring it to the surface. There is a a yeoman problem with a grant application and a time frame that may or may not be able to be met. And I know that Assistant Manager Saul and Manager Janet are working very hard on Bowers, and I appreciate that effort. I don't think it's just coincidental that the city, the people in the city came forward to let their feelings be known. And this is how things move forward in a community like this, that the citizens need to tell their representatives what is important to them. We find that in every level of government. And if government is left to its own, it will do its own thing. So I really appreciate that there's that effort being made. I am an advocate for this heat loop project. I'm strongly advocate. I will admit that when it comes to bid, I will probably have to take some leeway in what I present, because I will want to bid on this. I want to be part of this thing as a contractor. This is exciting. And I will speak to any group that I can. I was interviewed by the Reporter the other day. I don't know where that's going to go. I've been invited to speak to local organizations. My vision is something that's more than dollars and cents. We're looking at something here that says a coefficient of efficiency, a return of investment. That's important. The money's got to come from someplace. But we fund a ton of things, I've said it before, but we fund a ton of things that don't have a dollar and cent return. They have a bigger return, a more important return. And I think this project is one of those.
I would just like to thank everybody from the public who came out, and I would also like to mention that next Tuesday from 5 to 7 over at Zudy's and Primrose Provision, there is an International Women's Day celebration that is open to the public. So from 5 to 7 over there. And you should see purple ribbons around town. Those are going to be handed out at various locations to wear in support of recognition of International Women's Day. And I think Seward is a phenomenal community in the female leadership that we have here. And so I'm excited about that day. And with that, I will call...
Administration comments?
Oh, yes, sorry.
So I apologize that I didn't have the answer to Pat Gabb's question earlier about the parcel size that the public workshop sits on. So on the west side, it's 0.96 acres, and on the east side, it's 1.24 for a total of 2.2 acres. And then with regard to the heat loop, I just want to make it abundantly clear that city administration 100% supports this project. The city manager, myself, we've paid our staff grant writer from R&M Engineering. Last month took a look at the project and identified 3 specific grant opportunities with the Department of Energy that will be available hopefully this coming fall. We've corresponded with Eric O'Brien with the Denali Commission. We have a meeting on Monday with the folks from the National Renewable Energy Lab to talk about the grant possibilities. So I just want to make it really, really clear, because there have been some inaccurate statements that city administration does not support this project, and that is patently false. We do. We just got to find the grant money. So we will continue to request extensions on the $725,000 grant that we've already been awarded. We're pretty confident we'll keep getting extensions, and we'll continue to ask for extensions until the day when we come up with a grant to fund this. This is a really, really cool project. We do support it. We do want it to happen, and we'll do everything within our power to find a grant to pay for it. It's just coming up with the $2.8 million. So we will absolutely continue to do that. And yeah, if anybody has any more that they want to talk about the project, feel free to reach out. Thanks.
Yeah, so on the housing thing, I know it's been talked about a long time, but I just, with these new subdivisions going in, I just think somehow through code or whatever to cap the VRBOs, cap them, stop them, grandfather in the ones that's here now. I think that's our problem. I know everybody wants to make money, can't, blame nobody for trying to make money, but it's definitely created a housing problem everywhere. It's not just Seward, but I think if we can just cap it, it'll definitely just start.
That's fine.
Could I just,
No, we have to close.
oh, we do?
And then you can talk.
Okay, I'll tell them later.
We're closing the meeting at
Move to adjourn.
2:10. Adjourn, meeting is adjourned.
I think it was great.
There-
Okay.